What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Cover Killer Nation here. Another terrific heavy metal weekend has just passed us, which means that there's another one that's right on the horizon. That's sort of how time works. But before we can focus ourselves 100% with the future, we need to reflect on this past weekend and discover a couple of albums that perhaps have passed most of you by that certainly are worth investigation. So before we take a look at some of the big releases that are going to be coming in the remainder of September, let's examine 5 recently released albums from this past weekend that you absolutely need to check out. So let's get started. Let's start with our very first observation, which is The Crypts of Sleep by Hans Grossman. Now, Hans Grossman is a name that should be familiar to you, but if it's not, I'll help you out. A couple years back, the Acolyte Project, that was a fantastic album from 2015, but he also has some roots even further back than that, like to the mid-2000s, with a band whose name is on the tip of my tongue. They had an album called Epitaph or something like that. He was the drummer on that disc. He's the drummer here. He's the primary songwriter as well on this, his second solo record. He has a lot of his friends from Acolyte helping him out, as well as those that are well-traveled in bands such as Obscura, such as Hate Eternal, or such as Dark Fortress, who handles most of the vocals on this disc. So it already has some nice star appeal going in. I love the fact that even though this is technical death metal, which is what we're used to hearing from Acolyte, what we're used to hearing from Obscura, really what we're used to hearing from this crop, it still has sort of that fresh feel because it's being handled by those that are exceptional at this subgenre of heavy metal. And I also love the fact that the very second track on this album, Silence Speaks, really feels like this tremendous homage to death. And I'm not taking anything away from the lead vocalist of Dark Fortress, but you would almost love to hear Chuck Schuldiner be alive and handle the vocal duties on this song, even just in a covers format, because you know that he would absolutely crush it. I love how this is an album also that has a little bit more straightforward nature to it from time to time. It's not something that really aims to deliberately overcomplicate itself. It's instead one where the songwriting feels very solid. Take a look at some of the massive moments from the second half of this album, such as the title track, either that or Gravity Waves, and you start to really get what I'm talking about. But whenever you get to Ocean-Born Master, you start to hear some of the softer elements that this album is able to possess before thrusting back into that tech death wizardry, which is certainly something that is welcome news. So if you're a fan of Obscura, if you're a fan of Acolyte, if you're a fan of any of the musicians within the Acolyte family, this is an album that you certainly need to discover for yourself and certainly check out, considering it's going to feel right within that same wheelhouse. It's almost like getting an Acolyte release here in 2016, only under a completely different name. But by completely different name, I mean the man who was handling the drums anyway. So is it really all of that different? Just check the album out. I think you'll really enjoy it. Scintilla by Nosound is our second observation. Now, those of you who love to explore the discographies of the bands from this series, do not be surprised if this one sounds markedly different than the other 4 that they have in their discography, and it's because it is. It's a more stripped-down approach instead of aiming for a little bit more of a symphonic breed of progressive rock or art rock, whichever you wish to style it. That being said, I really like this change, principally because that stripped-down approach does add to a lot of the sort of intimacy and sort of the emotion that is painted throughout these tracks, instead of it being one that feels like the instrumentalization, either that or the symphonic composition sort of tries to build a lot of excessive emotion. This is one that's a little bit more organic. It lets the emotion sort of bleed through not only that soft register in the instrumentation, but also within the voices that you hear. Now, the cool part about this is that they were able to get a couple of guests for this, including Vincent Cavanaugh from Anathema, but also they have an Italian singer that sings on the 5th track, which is Sogno e Incendro. I know I just absolutely destroyed that, but what you should really take away from this is that whenever I listen to this song, I immediately got some big-time feelings toward David Bowie whenever it came to some of the vocal delivery that you heard from this guest. And it is absolutely kind of mesmerizing, considering we just lost David back in January. But to hear that voice, I almost had to do a double take. I had to do some massive digging to make sure it wasn't secretly David Bowie recording this before he passed and things like that. But it was just Wow, what a moment to actually cause some hairs to stand up on your body. the two tracks rather that I really signal as massively delicious for these guys is The Perfect Wife, which is a 7-minute track on the album's second half, but then Evil Smile, which is the second to last cut off of this disc, which almost shimmers similar to Happy Returns from Steven Wilson's Hand Cannot Erase from 2015. It's something that is very, simply presented, but then just has all of this emotion just sort of bleeding through its pores that gives it such a power that is all its own. So if you're progressive rock nuts, these guys are from Italy, you're going to like them a whole heck of a lot, so scope out this disc. Tetragenetron with the Mourning of Father Hart. It's just as strange as it sounds, I assure you. These guys are an avant-garde, space metal, spoken word, WTF product out of New Hampshire, and believe me, WTF is very fair. That's the avant-garde playbook 101 for you, considering this is definitely a sonic exploration, to say the least. This is one that sort of takes a look at conventional musical rule books and sort of just takes a big old dump on them and then throws them against the wall, sees in which places the dump slash rule book papers stick, and decides just to go with that. And it kind of works for the guys. It kind of works for this group a little bit, considering it's not one that feels like anything that you've ever heard before. It's a bit free range. It has a lot of heart behind it, and certainly some of the tones do not always strike you as beautiful. If you remember the Porcupine Tree song, "They Are Not All Beautiful," it definitely describes this album very well, but it kind of works considering it has this seductive allure as you're listening to it, because you're really unsure what's going to happen next. For example, The Funeral of Sister Hart starts off with a bizarre set of chords and structures that then goes into this exploration of space metal or space rock that is, it kind of comes out of nowhere and you're not exactly too sure what its presence is there, but you're oddly enamored by it. It's sort of one that takes you by surprise and sucks you in. But the second half of this disc definitely possesses some of the strongest material on this album, with Hart Amare being one of the best. This near 6-minute long cut certainly bends things and bends the rules while it's at it, going into Morticon, which is 12 minutes in length nearly, which is an exploration all its own, one that bends convention once again, but is able to traverse between all-out chaos and again, that sort of spacey aura. And it's almost one that feels like the whole entire album is the chaos prior to death leading to the spacey, release of emptiness, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how to describe this album. It's wild, and based off of that, you should at least give it a listen just to see if you can make any sense of it. And if you do, leave something in the comments helping me out. Thanks. Let's move on. Eye of Solitude with Cenotaph is our fourth observation today, and these guys have links to the Funeral Doom department. And I know some of you that has created an instant pass, stay with me. Those that are not feeling that way are probably getting a little bit giddy. Now, as you might imagine, this is being a 4-track affair. No song is under the 10-minute mark. This is one that trogs along. It has a crawl to it. It certainly is bearing of the name of Funeral Doom and certainly wears it well. This is one, though, where the group decides to put a little bit more involved into this, as opposed to just having it sort of stay at one pace or only shift very minutely, adding some symphonic elements here and there, mainly through the use of just some great guitar work, either that or just some great atmospheric work in order to build something. And really, within the opening track, Cenotaph, you are thinking that you are in traditional territory until you get to about the 8-minute mark and you hear those clean vocals and you're like, whoa, these are really, really good. And it's something that presents sort of that mourning idea that this song and that this album really aims to really deliver in just a brand new light. And it's very sorrowful, it's very melancholic, it's one that has a lot of just despair sort of laced all over it, and it gives it a nice little boost. And then you start to listen to the rest of this disc, and all of a sudden some of the sins of the opening few minutes that just sort of sound like it's a little bit derivative for the family are just gone. It's like, what the hell happened? The band starts to really open up their gates a little bit more. It is still Funeral Doom. It has that slow burn to it, but it is also one that feels a lot more densely rich, and it aims to really evoke a couple of more emotions here and there instead of feeling just like, here you go. this is interesting. This is one that maybe you should check out based around this idea. If you really like the Boats of the Glen Carrig from Ahab last year, you probably should check out Solitude Cenotaph. It's a little bit darker. However, it's an album that will probably fulfill that itch for a little funeral doom in your life. So check it out. Our last observation for today might be perfect for those of you that really enjoy the lyrics to the Joker. You know, you're a joker, you're a smoker, you're a midnight toker. Because Monkey 3 is definitely a band that is apt for the midnight toker. Astra Symmetry is the name of this album. These guys are a group from Switzerland. They're pretty awesome, actually. I'm not going to lie. This is a stoner rock band that has traces of prog in there, that has some traces of metal that exude from time to time. But all in all, these guys are more of just a fun jam band, and it's got a lot of great element to it, mainly because it's not something that feels that it's locked into just being guitars, drum, and the traditional format is, I guess what I'm saying. You're going to get some drum fills in there that sound like there's some bongos that are touched in from time to time. There's a little bit of hypnotic nature to this, almost as though they're trying to aim for a little bit of that sort of transy environment that goes along with it. This is certainly something that if you enjoy some substances, will probably get a whole heck of a lot out of this music, and that includes the entirety of their discography. I posted a track on my personal Facebook page last night about this band that was from a couple of years ago, just absolutely blew my mind, and I was stone sober. So these guys are pretty cool. There's not very much in the way of lyricism to this. It's sort of seldomly scattered across this 12-track affair, and these are longer songs, longer movements. My recommendation for you to check this one out is to just get yourself some time, put yourself in a room, maybe lay back, relax after perhaps some consumption, and just sort of space out a little bit and let this music be your guide. It is truly transformative, or at least will be for some of you. And if you're knocking this for not being 100% metal, then you're your own real safety net whenever it comes to being able to explore the recesses of your mind. Really, really dig these guys. I'm going to be really burying myself into a lot of their past work over the next week. Just kind of, it's relaxing to me. I really like it a lot. I think that you will as well. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. 5 recently released albums from this past weekend that you should check out. If you're wondering what I'm planning to review this month, I did a video that's going to highlight that. I'm going to leave a link for you somewhere around here. But do not feel as though that means that this series is going to be slowing down. If anything, there's plenty for us to talk about that I can't pack into full-length reviews. So definitely return next Tuesday whenever we take a look at 5 more recently released albums that you should check out. I'm coverkillernation, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, become a patron, or drop a donation. Anything and everything that you opt to do really, really helps out a lot and keeps this channel going, keeps these series going. So thanks again for all of your support, and I'll see you next week.